welcome to the second Open Space Committee 2024. Thank you guys for showing up. It's good to see everybody.
Yep.
So I guess Mike and Martha and I talked a little about the agenda, but we're open to other things if anyone has any thoughts. I think I sent around some minutes, so we should probably actually take a vote to approve them. That said, we're still, Martha and Mike
technology issues
are
here.
official members. Does anyone have any edits or comments? Did you get a chance to look at them?
No, I didn't, but I'm happy to look at them right now as we talk.
Yeah.
And we didn't do the, email, click on the thing to be, click on the button on the website. With that, there might have been like some hesitation there, but we'll do it. We'll do it this week if that's still the, if that's still the request to officially be on the committee.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah, I know Martha talked with the chair of the select board a little bit, and I think that, I don't know, you have any updates on any process they should go through to officially become members?
Yeah, I think I did mention to Alicia, the chair, that the committee has gotten reactivated, so thought that was great. So I think maybe what we could do is if you would still, sort of follow the process that's been requested by the select board, but we at the same time could also, as the three kind of standing committee members, send just a recommendation to the select board saying that, we've had several meetings with you and, would request and recommend your appointment.
Okay.
So, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, so we should, you will do that first, or we do it first and you do it second? Or did we get out of are we out of the mix and it all happens by you?
No, I think it would be you submitting your basically letter of interest or email of interest to the select board, and then if you want to CC like Kristen and me,
Perfect.
then we can follow up with the
Well,
recommendation.
why do we come on? Why do we have to go through the pretense of this essentially? Why can't we have a situation where essentially you recommend that these people would volunteer? I just find that other process demeaning, frankly, among other things. And I won't say any more, but I hate being treated like a child.
I mean, we can recommend it, but they still have to say they want it, I mean, I've had that happen where, somebody from town has reached out to me and said, oh, you've been recommended for X, Y, Z. I've yayed or nayed it. So, I mean, I understand that a little bit, you know what I mean? Like,
It's showing your
Yeah.
personal interest in actually
Yeah,
doing the thing.
exactly.
I also see it as an opportunity for you to say why you're interested and just like tell them a little bit about yourself directly, rather than having me try to be like, David has experience with Greenbelt and trustees. It's more, I mean, you know them, they know you, so you're in a slightly different position than other folks who've never volunteered for the town before.
Okay, if you want to do it that way, do it that way, and I'll play ball, but I find it quite extraordinarily odd. Never mind.
I mean, I just mean like, I wouldn't want to be named to a committee without showing my own interest in it,
Well, presumably that's because we've done it to the staff. I mean, that's all I'm thinking. Because what concerns me is that we also frankly need, I believe, representatives from the Recreation Committee and from the Conservation Commission on this committee. Okay? And I don't know whether that gets done at this point or whether once we have a committee, then the committee asks or invites. I mean, how do you want to play that?
Yeah, I mean, I know the rec committee has a position that's intended to be an open space committee member, but I'm not sure that has ever actually happened. Maybe in the past it has, I don't know, but it isn't currently. So having liaisons makes sense, but I don't know if if someone has to be on two committees or if there's other ways to share the information.
Well, I only think that's important because maybe places may go later, but most of the activity that's taken place in the last decade or so has been recreational. So, I mean, to me, that's why I would think.
Yeah, they've had a more active committee in recent years.
Yeah, but also, I mean,
That is-
they've generated funds, all kinds of things have happened, and they have all been things which have expanded essentially the one area in the Open Space Committee, which is recreation, which has been the most active one. All the others have been relatively, quiet. And the Conservation Commission is, it seems to me, an obvious thing, simply because they essentially are, the custodians through state law and local regulations of the kind of land that a committee like this is dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I mean, I think those are great points. I wonder if there's a job to discuss someone attending one of those committee meetings to just kind of open the conversation. Like, I'm a current or about to be a member of the Open Space Committee, we're getting reactivated, love to hear from the Conservation Commission members themselves, what do you see your role being
Sure.
in the work? I mean, I think CONSCOM meets every 3 weeks.
I think they meet twice a
weeks?
month now.
Yeah.
On the second and, first and third Tuesdays, I think.
And I think the rec committee meets monthly, so that would certainly be
Yeah.
kind of a to-do we could talk about
Right.
if anyone's interested in that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to attend one of them, the Concom. I'm more familiar with what the Concom does, so maybe I shouldn't do that one. I shouldn't offer to do that one. And I should offer to do the Recreation Department one, but I'm happy to.
Yeah,
Just go
they're
and
still
say
on
hi.
Zoom too, so that's, there's no, I would say there's no limit, but if we wanna, that'd be great.
Okay.
People,
If we want to go that route, I'm happy to volunteer to say hello to the rec department during one of their meetings, get on the agenda and just let them know that we're here and what our plan is and see their level of engagement and or priorities. If they wanted to send along any priorities, just open the dialogue.
that sounds great. Other people think that makes sense, it's a good idea. I don't think we need a vote or anything, but like consensus. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's a good idea.
that'd be great. I think we can look at my calendar and find out when their meetings are and we can talk about it. I'm happy to help make that connection. Anyone interested in saying hello to the Conservation Commission
Yeah, I mean, we could do that.
at a meeting? I mean, I think you all know we don't have an agent right now, which
Yeah.
is, means the commission's doing a lot and Martha and other staff are supporting them as well, but I think it would be easy enough to request to be on the agenda just as like a new business or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you want to sit over here until we get I know. Come on over. I don't want to be like the one who talks all the time at these meetings. Okay, well, thanks, Christina, that's awesome. And, Mike?
And maybe we can decide, at the end of this meeting if like the next one makes sense, or do we wanna get ourselves like any more collected? I feel like what we came up
Yeah.
with last year, last week was, or the last meeting was that we had sort of our long range schedule that we wanted to do it during fiscal year 2025, so like,
Right.
you know, it might not be that we have to go to the next one, you know, do we want to even collect our thoughts for another couple of meetings, or do we wanna give them the heads up and it is good to go do the next one? So, happy to
Yeah.
see where we
Yeah, I
land.
suppose just kind of one administrative thing, it might be good to actually get the appointments made by the select board so that you're official members of the committee and then
Yeah, that makes sense.
do it from there. So,
Great.
So I brought the plan that we have printed, I've got the most recently updated one on the website. And then, you know, again, when Mike and Mark and I talked, we just sort of thought it could be useful to kind of go through this and think a little more about, like, can we do this in-house? I've been also trying to do a little research and attending some meetings about grant funds that might be available, if we felt like our volunteer and staff power, you know, couldn't do it on our own and we wanted to hire a consultant. That's certainly a way a lot of towns get this thing done. So in order to think about, you know, what it is and what it would take, we were thinking it would just make sense to kind of go through the different sections, which
Sure.
is, instead of like printing up a lot of paper, we've got one pack of paper, and then we've got it on the website.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's in the plan and then also see, like, refresh what is required as like the minimum requirements.
yeah, that was,
That's sort of like the key.
yeah, my next is we should go through the workbook as well and see exactly what's, you know, what we're required to do, and then give us a sense of how to approach it.
Do you want to start with a workbook instead? I haven't spent any time on the workbook.
I haven't done any, I think you could go either way, you know, we could kind of assess where we are and then kind of look at the workbook.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it hasn't changed in a while, so my guess is, maybe you're familiar with this too, but what's in here is probably what's required, like,
Yeah.
to the
A minimum.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like the different sections and the different components of the sections.
Yeah.
But I haven't, as Martha's saying, there's an actual like 45-page workbook to help towns create the plan that just lays out every section. So that might be, maybe that's the thing to
The
do,
place to
rather
start.
than just going through this one by one, because we can
Well,
all.
this is pretty well according to that workbook. Right.
Yeah, it's very much according to the
Yeah.
workbook. I think the only thing would
Hasn't
be is
changed.
if there's anything that's in the workbook that's changed, like I think some things, the ADA self-assessment might have been added late in the game, so there might be some, you know, some other things like that, but that will pretty much lay out what we need to do. But I think it could also be useful to go through the plan itself and just kind of refresh ourselves on the sections that we need. And there are certain things like the community setting and some of the other stuff, as we talked about last time, really, I think is in our master plan, natural resources section, so we should be able to pull a lot from that.
And the resiliency, which
Yes.
we mentioned, would be under the environmental
Yes, yeah,
section.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, do you want me to just go through the table of
Sure,
contents on this
yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, how do you want to do this? Do you want to read them off, or?
Sure, or just, maybe just scroll through,
Scroll
right?
through,
Just
yeah.
so we can kind of get a sense of what they actually are. Like statement of purpose, I don't. The purpose for the plan, or like the purpose for protecting open space?
Yeah, so we've got, actually, I'll just kind of go through the sections here. So the plan summary, and a statement of purpose,
The only thing I just jumped out at me is that it was a 2-year, I don't know if this was prepared starting from scratch or if it was an update of a previous plan, but it did say that it took 2 years to get that. So if we're just updating and they didn't have the basis, then I just, in thinking of our schedule, if we thought we would have an update done by July of next year, that's more like a year and a half. So
Right.
just level setting the expectations. And I think it seems reasonable, but I don't know, the previous one took 2 years, so just throwing it out there.
Right, and that one actually was, there was a previous one which was done, I think it was started in 1998, 99, and
Yeah.
completed in 2000.
Right,
So
right.
the
We inherited something that was sort of data-wise fairly decent, but in terms of being updated in terms of what actually was happening, it seems to me was different. Now, what are we sort of determining is our base point of this? The 2000, what's the date on it?
So this one, I guess the approval date was 2010.
Yeah.
Trend, okay,
So-
all right. So if that's the case, yeah, I mean, I think you raise it, well, I understand, if I understand you right, you know, a lot of this stuff we don't have to do, except look at it and just make sure that it's correct in relation to you know, what's actually out there. And after all, you know, the acreage of Old Town Hill has not changed in X numbers of years, etc. That given, I'd like to see this done a little differently, as you can imagine. You know, I don't want to be difficult, but I would suggest that what we might start by doing is looking at what, if anything, and I don't say that as a criticism, but what, if anything, transpired between 2010 and today. In other words, what did the plan achieve to date? Because otherwise, if we don't have some, seems to me, if we don't have some kind of evaluation of what the plan does, going through the same motions, which is what we would do if we use the workbook, is going to get us to the same place. And personally, I don't want to go revisit the same place, in the sense that I hope that we would come to some insight as to what a plan needs to be. And what it needs to be, in my estimation, is not what the plan says, meaning the state, but it's what we want, what we need within that framework. We don't have to go outside it necessarily, but that's why I'm pushing for the fact that it should involve other groups in the town, because if it doesn't, nothing happens. Or nothing happens in a coordinated way. And earlier today, just as an experiment, I said, okay, so if you come to Newbury and you want to know about Newbury and you like walking or you're a bird person or something, and you go on the website and you look under resident or visitor, what information's there? What tells you about this town, not only what's in it, but what's going on? And it's pretty thin. And the only thing I found that really speaks to directly on the website where you might go a walk is that there really isn't anything, except it's all somebody else's. It's all stuff from organizations like the trustees, and that's good. I mean, that's great. But at the same time, you know where the map of places you can go walk in town is? It's in here. It's the last page, I think maybe the last page. And with absolutely no modesty, you know who did it? Me, right? I wrote it and put it together, And I was astonished that it's sitting there just the way it was in 2010. Now that tells me something. And what it tells me is that, you know, we haven't used the plan in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say, is like the plan has a lot of information in it, but if you went to our website, you'd never know that. You wouldn't dive that deep. So I think those, you know, those kinds of, like observations and realities are relevant to this committee's work, I think. Like, do we, you know, is one of our goals gonna be to establish a better webpage that actually highlights, you know, the town's open space, and including work with partners and work that the town's done. I mean, there have been, you know, we were just talking about the property on Coleman Road, the new Greenbelt property, which came about through a planning board decision. So,
Right.
you know, there are actions that have happened, but they're not necessarily packaged up in a way that anyone would know about unless you're in the know. You know,
Yeah.
unless you're a former planning board member or a current planning board, you know, or whatever it is. So I think that's, you know, I think what you're saying, the plan probably does, you know, the workbook or the state or the folks there, they do want the plans to be specific and unique to a community. And there's, you know, the sections that talk about, like, the analysis of needs. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like, where have we come from the last bunch of years?
Yeah, the place, it seems to me, just lost it, the place you start is page 94, goals and objectives. What did that group, of which I was a part, and so was Martha, what did we set out as goals and objectives in a very simple way? And when one looks at those now, what do we learn from whether those worked or not? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the stuff at the beginning is like, if you don't really know the town, right? Like, if you don't really know what resources exist, and you don't know what, you know, wildlife habitats there are, and you don't know the geology, that's what all the front end of the plan is, so.
Right, but if you wanted to find out, come on, be real, Kristen, if you want to find out about the town at a level that the ordinary folk, citizen, taxpayer does, they're not gonna read that.
No, I'm saying we would read it as background in order to know what our goals and strategies are.
Okay.
Right, they help
I
inform
actually thought
goals and
it was
strategies.
really interesting. Some of the stuff I didn't know, like the history of Newbury.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
I thought it was, yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And I agreed 100%, like as I was reading this, I'm like, how are we gonna get this done? And how, you know, what's the path? Because this is all new to me. But what you're talking about, I think, is like going to a website. I mean, honestly, it's almost old school now. People don't even go to the website anymore to learn about stuff. They go to other venues to learn about things. So what you're talking about is very important, and I agree. But you're almost talking about outreach and education, which is the next step. So let's figure this out first, and then what you're talking about is huge, and that could be the next step. Or and it could be-
Incorporate it into the plan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and or it could be, yeah, that'd be the next, right, exactly.
One of our objectives.
One of our objectives within the plan, yeah.
Right, no, exactly, and it's sort of, you know, David, as you recall, when we started the master plan process, we went through the previous master plan and all the goals and objectives and sort of identified what we had accomplished and what we
Right.
hadn't and what was still relevant and what wasn't. So I think that's a crucial part of this whole exercise, but it seems like we've got sort of two missions here. One is what the state expects us to do so that we can have a plan that they will find appropriate, and we can go ahead and apply for various grant funds, but we need to make it very specific to Newbury and make sure that we include everything that we think needs to be done. So, and I think what you're saying is sort of, you know, updating the trail map, you know, making information about conservation lands available to people, all of that fits into the plan. Hey, Bill.
Hi.
Welcome. Are you here for the Open Space Committee?
FinCon?
7 o'clock.
Oh, I thought it was 6.
Yeah, no, Tracy said 7. You're welcome to join us.
No, I'll be back.
We won't take it personally, Bill.
Please don't.
No.
So are we saying that we want to update the goals and objectives to today's needs, desires, etc.? Are we also going back to the 2010 ones that we're showing here and doing a summary evaluation of assessment of how we've performed against those, which I think, David, is also what you were saying. I don't, are we doing both, I guess, is, you know, post and forward looking?
Yeah, we probably have to decide which one to do first.
Yeah,
I do
right.
think the forward looking, that requires public
Input,
engagement,
right.
like a
Yep.
survey and
Yeah.
a lot of public meetings. I don't know exactly how the workbook describes that now, but I know from working on other plans that that can take a long time,
Sure.
just that chunk of it. That's probably what, like, developing the survey and trying to get it out and trying to get people to reply to it and going to other committees to ask them to, you know, getting it. I mean, we've got some good local Facebook things, so I'd like to think, like, in today's social media, it's not maybe as hard to get survey input or responses as it was back when everything was paper, but it's still a big task, and I do think that's a specific requirement, is that happen early and feed into
Yeah.
the forward-looking stuff, which makes sense. So
Not to jump ahead on that too, but do we get support, or is there like Merrimack Valley, or like, because I know designing surveys is hard. It's not just like a questionnaire that we come up with, it's like
Right.
professionals make surveys, so they're non-biased, and so we can get true information. If we're targeting people that think like us, then we're really not gonna get the right results, and if we're gonna put that up, because like I read this and I was like, wow, the entire town of Newbury wants open space, this is gonna be easy, but I don't know if that's necessarily true.
yeah,
So we need to make sure we get that answer.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a question, like, that's right, then that would be, if that's a consultant, then that's
Mhm.
money to hire them. We don't have that in-house.
Right, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, that would
Yeah.
really go to, you know, the decision on whether we retain a consultant to work with us on it.
But that's not going to be new, is it? I mean, in the 2010, the results of the public meetings and the little way we did it then, I don't know whether that was, you know, we had a straw poll at the beginning, had a public meeting, pardon me, and a public straw poll at the end to see whether there was any shift after sharing the plan, okay? But what I found interesting looking at that today was, one, that I conducted the meeting, which terrified me, but anyway, I did, I forgot all about that. Was that there was a very heavy automatic kind of thing that, of course, we want to protect our land, right? And then you go all the way through to the end. And it's interesting, at that time, and still I think, and I have no idea what would happen if you asked the same question now, but the CPA, the Community Act, right, which Newbury has significantly failed to do anything about for year after year, is clearly, if you look at it, a key element. And so the way my head works is, if we can find out by looking at what happened in the past a little bit, what it is we need to know in order to ourselves begin to generate goals which reflect the community as we come to understand it. And if we don't do that, we'll produce a plan which will, frankly, little if anything will happen as a result of that plan. And I don't really want to be part of that process. Tell you a really quick story, okay? When we were doing the master plan years ago, I had wanted to find out what master plans looked like, having gone through the master plan workbook and got a very bad case of indigestion as a result. So I selected a few things, did it online, and I thought I'd love to find out physically what one looks like, actually got it in my hand. So I went to Beverly, okay, partly because it was easy at that point, my wife was working there. And I went to the town offices, and they had, and one of the reasons I went to Beverly was because they put one in, I think 2 years before I was there, okay, they'd finished one. And I went to the planning office. Guess what? They didn't have a copy. Didn't have a copy of the master plan. And they weren't quite sure, but they thought there was one at the library, probably. So I went to the library, and the librarian, who was a delightful gal, said, oh, yes, you know, I think, gee, I think they, yeah. Wait a minute, oh, why don't you come with me? So I went to this second floor, I think. We went into this room, and there indeed was a 3-ring binder, and there was Beverly's master plan. Okay, and I have to tell you, talking around the state, because I was doing a fair amount of traveling at that time as part of the commission, that's where a lot of plans end up. In fact, in some cases, you're lucky if it's in the library. What I'm getting at by telling that story is that that has been the attitude of many communities, and the fact, I think, that you mentioned, Kristen, last time, is that only barely 2/3 of the communities in the state have actually a filed open space plan. Isn't that right? Or is it the other way around? Is it just 1/3 and 2/3 haven't?
Yeah, 2/3 had adopted plans, 1/3,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it sort of tells you, I think, partly what communities do,
Yeah,
but also I think it tells you what happens to plans, and therefore how communities just sort of, you know, and that's why I guess I'm fussing at the idea that the part of the plan that the state wants to see are all the bit, you know, all the sort of check marks. There are, God knows, I think something like 25 pages in here of ADA compliance, or something like that, all of which is checking boxes, which one can do. But that's, I just think that one of the things, if we start with the goals that got set up last time, most of them are self-evident, I think. But the interesting thing to me, and I think should be to us, is did any of those goals make a difference to the town of Newbury in the last 20 years?
Well, let's read through them. I think we were going to start there, right? I think that maybe let's take a look, because it's a really
yeah.
good point.
And without getting too into the weeds, I mean, I'm curious how the progression from the goals to the objectives to the 5-year action plan and the status of that. I'm not saying we should go through every line in the action plan, because there's a lot there, but
It's a lot
I
there,
think
but-
that hardly reflects, you know, current state versus what we set out to do. And plays
But
into
if you
all.
read the action plan, it's pretty dispiriting.
I'm sure it is. but-
Yeah, that's
So
what I
so when
remember,
we
yeah.
read it, yeah.
I mean, really.
I guess I'm focused on the action just because that's where, the action's where there's gonna be meaningful difference. Maybe everything in the action plan doesn't get accomplished. I'm not sure how it's prioritized and all that, but it maybe then adds some, makes it a little more of a living document,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, what you're driving at.
Yeah, so you know, one of the things it seems to me, if you go through this, the first two goals, okay, no one can quarrel with those. I mean, that's motherhood and apple pie, isn't it? So then you get to goal number 3. And goal number 3 is partly, or I think was, the result of a fairly active discussion that was happening at the time. Right? I
It's
mean,
very specific, objective 3.1.
yeah,
Yes.
right, exactly,
Which hasn't
exactly.
happened.
And
No, it's all wetlands, so, you know,
There have been
no,
proposals. but-
I'm.
no, but
being
wait.
facetious.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's happened. There has been development there. There were no tennis courts there in 2010.
Well, this is at the
That's
Kent
Kentway.
Kentway site.
Oh,
across the
Kent
street
Way,
from here,
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
Elementary.
ridiculous. I don't know who, I mean, I can remember Doug's comments about that. Forget about Kent Way, oh, by the way, did you miss the excitement this morning?
Oh, the tree, yeah.
Yeah,
yes, I s-
trees
yes,
plural.
Yes, I
We-
saw
yes,
that.
okay. We had a huge crane taking down lots of dead trees, and so we had entertainment right out the front window. It was nice. Okay, I'm sorry, I was thinking of
Mantor.
Manta
The Central
Fields,
Street
which
Fields,
wasn't even
right.
called Manta Fields then.
Well, I
So,
certainly think back to your earlier point, what goal number 3 makes me think about is, well, what's the recreation committee,
do it.
what's framing their work right now? They, I think, have some kind of plan, some kind of master plan, or they're developing a plan, or, you know, they've had something guiding the work that's
Yeah.
come forward. So if this needs to capture that, then we absolutely need to go to them and bring it in instead of recreating something.
Right, I mean, there's a whole section in the plan on active recreation, and that's where the interface is gonna be critical. You know, how many softball or, you know, t-ball teams do they have, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And isn't there still an issue about the fact actually that the people who subscribe over at Manta Fields, for example, there are more people than we can accommodate, apparently, I always hear. In other words, there are more leagues or whatever they are that can't get on there because it's so heavily used. And there was a real upset that there was never until recently a proper ball field, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I know that
Well,
managing the
those
schedule
sorts of
is.
issues, I think, you know, are out there. And then if you, so, okay, then it's passive. And it was interesting that cobbling this together, the public meetings we had said that there didn't need to be as much focus on passive recreation as active recreation. Now, would that still be true? I don't know, but that was the emphasis, if I'm remembering it correctly.
No, there was a real push for active recreation at the time, which is why the Central Street Fields were acquired, as well as the fields at Kent Way. So you're right, it would be interesting to see, you know, have those needs been met to one degree or another? And is there a shift in balance now between that and the need for passive recreation? And those.
Well, that would argue that the plan has gone well. Like if that was a heavy component of the last plan was to focus on active recreation, I would say they've done a pretty good job because that committee has been active, it's brought things
Right.
to town meeting, they've developed new, you know, they're doing the pickleball, like they're doing new things as
Mhm.
well as maintaining what they have. You know, there's been a lot of
active recreation work done, I would say, probably in the last decade. So that was success, you know, if that was sort of identified through the public
Right,
process
right,
10 years
yeah.
ago, then that's,
But then if you go
That's
to goal
done.
number 5, that's where it all falls apart a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's, you know.
For example, have we managed to permanently put into conservation the upper and lower green?
Not yet. There's a local historic district being worked on for the lower.
Well, yeah, right, but no, I'm,
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
you know, I mean, that tells you a whole story, doesn't it? The fact that we have 2 of the oldest public spaces in town that are not permanently protected with preservation restrictions. Did you know that?
I didn't know if they were or weren't. Who has care, custody, and control of those properties? Just the select board? It's not, there's not a, I mean, isn't the Upper Green Historic District?
It's within the National Register Historic District.
Does that have a
But that
level of
doesn't-
protection?
Yeah, but
Like,
that's, yeah.
You
I
could
mean,
just
that
go
would
build a
protect you
town
from-
hall in the middle of the T-ball field?
No, it would protect you from federal monies being spent. Anything where federal monies were involved, that's it. But national historic districts are, what shall I say? You'll need to talk to my wife because she's put together a number of them. They're sort of, they're important nationally and important locally, but they have very few teeth. Whereas permanent protection, like greenbelt properties, I mean, the one I was at and sent you the report on, which is the Ordway property, that's permanently protected forever. You can't go build houses on it. The only way you could do that was to overturn the permanent protection by going to land court, which is,
No, it's much harder than that.
yeah, it's much, all right,
And I mean,
yeah. So anyway,
unfortunately, you
there
cannot force
you go,
people to
that's
protect
one
their
of the
land.
things that hasn't happened, and I think largely because there was no committee set up or group set up to monitor the open space plan, which is item number 1 of goal 5.
Yeah, I was curious how, you know, the action plans translated into rules and responsibility and budget for the rules and responsibility, like, is there, you know, a person I was trying to think through if we come up with goals and action plans, you know, it's good to say, here's the action and here's who's gonna do it and here's how it's gonna be funded. So, you know, and if there just isn't that, like, continuity of all 3 of those pieces of information, it's hard to have them get done.
Right.
You know, unless they just sort of get woven into something else, that's not the open space plan, you know?
Right, but you really need somebody who's gonna be.
Yeah,
kind
who's
of-
in the room, kind of
Yeah,
thinking about
yeah.
it or paying
Yeah.
attention to it.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's exactly to get into. I think it's actually a 7-year action plan, not a 5-year. But, you know, that's exactly what the action is, the
Oh, there it is. Yeah,
whose
yeah.
responsibility, what the timing is, meaning the priority, what the status is, and then the funding source. So, you know, all of that was identified for all of the goals and objectives. But it's really been a matter of I'd say, capacity in terms of trying to
Yeah, understandable.
move it.
Which is, I mean, all of those are volunteers who are listed, right? Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Open Space Committee, Conservation Commission. Oh, what's BOA?
Board of Assessors.
Oh, yeah, Rec Committee. So, we've all been volunteers, we are right now, but we come and go, right? Like, and that's, it really, I mean, the story of Ipswich was, they recognized that in order to really take care of their open space, they needed a staff member. So they figured out a way to fund a position, and that position has been funded, and they now have 2 positions. not through CPA, through other revenue streams. And they've, you know, it's still hard. But
Sure.
there's a lot of, you know, there's regular monitoring of the properties, and they've, you know, they've managed to have the planning directorate include a dedicated person to continue to work with the open space committee. The volunteers still do a lot. But if you don't have someone whose job it is to be you know, tracking all that.
Yeah, no, it's just
the
what I was thinking.
volunteers kind of come and go.
Was like, do
and-
we get to the point of, and as part of our survey, do we say like, would you be willing to pay more taxes in order to fund a position to do this, you know? Is this a position that we want to create, and it could maybe serve not just the open space committee, but other committees as well, but again, it would be adding to the town budget, which, you know, it's like,
Right.
moving a mountain, so it just was in the back of my mind
Mhm.
as to whether it was be something that we wanted to even consider as part of the open space plan, an action item being identifying
I
an
think it's a-
actual position.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
would
it
the
seems to
town
make
be
sense.
open, like, at this point of the game, would this town, like, be open to saying, yeah, I'd be willing to pay a little bit more in my taxes, cause I want someone to protect the open space, and I don't know if that's true, everybody might say, nope, we're already, you know,
Yeah.
we pay too many, and the answer is no, but it's interesting.
Because it would be hard to, like, you could think of 8 categories of things that if there was a dedicated person, then the town would be able to do a little bit more than what it's doing now. Like, I don't know, climate resiliency or transportation or
Right.
whatever else, recreation even, you know, just different.
But with a staff person too, you know, that person might be able to then be looking for grants and applying for grants, and it could be, you know, somehow self-sustaining or something. But,
Yeah, but,
I mean, look at this thing, like some point,
Yeah.
right? 300 pages of all those different things, including open space in here, but there's a lot of actions in
Yeah.
here. I mean, I think it's not like black and white, right? Like my opinion is you kind of need both. You need people, both volunteers and staff, who are using it. Like keeping it in mind, like the daily grind. Are you trying to protect the farmland when you do a subdivision? Like, yeah, this town is kind of keeping things in mind, but you know, the dedicated, like, moving initiatives or projects forward that wouldn't happen otherwise, right? I always think of it as like do you have women's studies program in college? Or do you just read women in your English classes as well as men, as well as, you know, is it sort of incorporated in, or is it like separate? It's kind of gotta be both, I think, to really move stuff forward.
so that's why we need to co-opt stakeholders, right? That's why,
Broadening,
yeah,
The
and that's why I
discussions.
feel we need to figure out who on the board, the select board, we need to strong arm to join us. Because we need,
you're gonna get Bill back in there.
well, right, I mean, actually, it might
Yeah.
be the very person who came in
We
earlier,
plotted that,
happens, yeah, because he's that kind,
I told you so.
he's that kind of guy.
Yeah,
But, no, you do, you need,
yeah.
you know, you need, so I think, yeah, absolutely. I caution you, however, sorry to say this, but I caution you about talking about staff. I understand your perspective, but I just have to remind you what happened to the town hall proposal. And in the past, etc., this town is very bad about spending money to go places. It's not too bad about spending money after we have a disaster or a real problem, but we're not very good, and I think that, you know, that's, I wouldn't want to mention that publicly, that we think there should be, I really, because I think it's the wrong kind of thing to say, though I understand, you know, I think what you do is you prove, if one can, that you can do it without, and look what you can do without, so just imagine what you could do with, if you follow my strange logic there.
Yes, yes. No, it's a politically fraught, you know, idea. It's just, you know, it's the obvious solution that is never, it's not a solution. Right? Yeah, and that's obvious for sure.
Or at least not yet.
Yeah. But it's something to at least kind of
Yeah.
keep into the back of our minds, right, as we walk through. So I know we have a few more minutes, and one thing that I wanted to touch on today, just to make sure that we don't miss any opportunities, was that the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, their scope of work for the next fiscal year, there was some talk about what that looks like, and I didn't know if there was a schedule, if we knew like when that scope of work is gonna be finalized, the agreements are gonna be signed, the money goes into the budget. And if there's an opportunity for us to kind of advocate a little bit for letting them know that we would like them to run some new numbers that they, you know, update from what they did previously, and then see if there is any wiggle room there where we might even be able to push a few more hours onto their plate as part of this budget.
So the way that works is there are kind of two ways it could be done. One would be to actually develop a scope of work for things that we think they could do, like say help with the mapping, or you know, help if there's any additional work needed for, say, the natural resources section or something like that. But in those cases, they will put together that scope of work, and then we actually fund that. So it's not funded through their budget, but there's another opportunity. It's local technical assistance for certain kinds of things. They do have certain number of hours which we can request for certain specific tasks, up to an amount. I think it might be $25, 25 hours per fiscal year or something like that. But our work is not going to be within their budget. It would be a separate contract that we would enter into with them, that we would pay for, but they would do the work just like any other consultant. So.
And so what was the framework again of the second option? The, you know, kind of the 25 hours to update numbers that they have access to?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be updating the numbers. It would be for a specific task. We've used them mostly for like GIS for mapping and that kinds of thing. I think a lot of the numbers.
What is our budget number? Do you know?
For.
Can you, well, I mean, presumably the towns have budgets according to their population and needs and so on, so can you find out how much our annual, because they do that, I mean, I know that.
Well, there's the annual assessment, which is kind of separate from anything. That's just the dues that we pay to them as for the communities. They don't set aside a number saying, oh, we've got X number of dollars allocated for Newbury in their budget.
No,
So how does that
okay.
25 hours work then? Like
So-
how do we get some of the 25 hours for open space?
So we would identify a task, like say we wanted them to update our maps, for example, and we would talk to them about what we want to have done. They would say, well, it's going to take 25 hours of GIS time. And then we would fill out a form, which I'm the commissioner, so I could actually sign the request and give it to them, and then they would approve it.
So what's the timing of that process?
It's usually pretty quick.
But can we do it right tomorrow? Is it fiscal year? Like when do they allow us to ask for that money?
Anytime during the fiscal year. We usually don't ask for all of it at one time. It'll be, you know, smaller chunks. Like we used some LTA time a few years ago for the Historic Commission. They wanted their historic resources map updated and digitized, so they did that for, you know, X number of hours. So that came out of our bucket of hours.
Is there anything left for this fiscal year?
I could check with Gerard to see. I don't think we've actually used much.
Yeah, I just wonder if they have the same fiscal year calendar that we do, if we could do something before the end of June, and then we could do something more like the end of the year. We would kind of be in two different buckets. I know I'm advocating to take all the town's buckets, but hours, but
Yeah.
just, you know, I'm just thinking it through.
Town health does.
If we
No,
haven't
well,
used it.
You're absolutely right, that's what they're there for, okay? And I don't know if you remember, when we were doing the master plan years ago, the one in 2000, whatever it was, 6, 7, 8, they essentially did the natural resources section for us, okay? And in fact, they were, I think, contracted to do it.
And we did the same with this update. They did, the previous one, Tony,
Right.
they did
Yeah,
transportation.
but okay, but
Yeah.
they were doing that, and then what happened was, it was not clear as to how that was gonna fold into the master plan itself. And so, well, you can guess this about me, I just picked up the phone and I talked to Alan McIntosh, who was then their environmental program person. And what I did was to talk to him and figure out what we needed to do was to put together Gerard, who at that point was GIS czar, and Alan, and have them come and have a conversation with us, the planning board, as to what their resources were, what kind of connections they can make, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially, what I'm wondering is, do they now, does the commission now have some people who have experience of town surveys, or whatever area you want?
Right.
What you have to do is you have to ask. And they may say, oh, gee, no, I haven't, you know, if you find one, tell us. Or they may say, well, yeah, maybe, and if it's just a 2-hour session or a couple of hours, or sitting down with Kristen and Martha, who knows? But I really think there's a bit more flexibility there if one raises a hand.
No, they're tremendous, I mean, they're tremendous, and they've got, you know, their staff has grown tremendously since,
Yeah,
you know, since you were the commissioner. So they're always happy to work with us. I think the key is to kind of figure out what we would like them to do.
Mhm.
And then
Right.
have that conversation.
I think they respond to challenges too, interestingly. I mean, if they have a community that's really wanting to do something a little different, maybe, they like that.
Yeah, I mean, just in a rough way, you sort of think, well, the GIS mapping is a technical thing that probably none of us, except maybe our Greenbelt, can help with, but, you know, we don't have GIS in town hall, there's no GIS, which is interesting in itself, but we have partners, right? Like, that's who we have MVPC, we have Greenbelt, we have other partners. The survey, I think, to your point, is like a really good one, because you can do a survey, or you can actually, like, survey, right? So there are different levels of expertise related to that bucket, I would say. I mean, updating, like, a lot of the beginning stuff, which is descriptive, you know, the geology hasn't changed, right? Like, the text, probably those are areas
Right.
we could, among ourselves, kind of do, or we research and find the right people who know a little bit more than we do. So those are 3 components that are like pretty good, and then, you know, the real, you know, meat of the plan is the actions, and we've sort of talked about different strategies to get there, but, you know, updating what's happened since the last plan, that's something we could probably start among ourselves. Martha has been here, you've been here, you know, we can get access to the information. So maybe that's the way to think about it, is like, what do we need money for? And then what's the timing of that? Sounds like we have some resources through MVPC in the current fiscal year.
Yes,
Yeah, because the thing just to quickly say, the grants, I've been poking around the planners listserv and the state website, looking at how other towns fund their open space rec plans. And there's community planning grants through what the state calls their one-stop program now, so you just tell them what you want and then they try to find the right funding source among like all the different, it's actually very fascinating. I just did a webinar yesterday about how One Stop works. And the way it works is you just write a letter of interest when the period opens, which it does next week, and saying what you want, and then they review it and kind of tell you, like, this is competitive for this particular funding source or whatever. And then the applications aren't actually due until May, the month of May, pretty much. But that is a fiscal year that you wouldn't know if you got the grant award until September. You wouldn't be able to contract until October, November. So that would really be like waiting, 6 to 9 months before we know if we'd have that funding. And maybe we don't need it if we have these other ways to get little pieces. I don't really know. I think we should think about that a little more.
We should think about it, because maybe in the last 6 months there is something that we could do, or if it seems like it's reasonable, we extend our schedule by, 6 more months or something along those lines. But maybe it's not worth it, you're right, but it's worth thinking about.
Yeah. I think, and most of what I've seen other towns do is you get $45,000 and you hire a person who does this stuff.
Yeah.
And they just come in and they do it. They do the survey, they do the outreach, they come to your meetings, they work with you. That would work. There are plenty of consultants who do this stuff who'd be great to work with, I'm sure. I think the thing I always think about is like $45,000 for Newbury, like where does this particular project fall? It'd be great. I guess I'll just put out there, like, I sort of wonder if we can do it for less and get it done, get this plan done, and then we can actually do, like, hold walks on properties and get, better information out through outreach. I don't know,
Put in
just
a grant
stuff
to have
that's
somebody to
actually,
help oversee things for the first year or two.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
But,
So, anyway.
cynically, we could rewrite, no, not even that. You could resubmit this plan with a couple of updates that I can think need doing, which would sort of give one some sense. And nobody would know the difference in terms of where it goes to the state. They wouldn't know, okay? We would know. I'm not suggesting we do that, but what I'm trying to get at is,
Yeah.
please get off this damn plan thing in terms of getting the plan done. For me to pay money to a consultant to get a plan like this done is criminal. Absolutely criminal. Okay?
Well, we can't do it ourselves.
Of course you can. Could take this. Hey, look, I
Yeah.
could do this in 7 nights. I could put together something like this that could go in the state, and there might be the odd question because they have a little list of odd questions to ask. Okay, all I'm trying to get at is...
I know what you're getting at, but
yeah.
I think they actually have some requirements that I don't think we could do ourselves, one of which is the public outreach and survey. I mean, they require proof that you have gotten a significant amount of public input. That would just take time.
Yeah, but okay, are you trying to tell me that 100 and something people, 6% of the property of the population of Newbury is satisfactory for the master plan? Because if that's the case, don't worry. Come on, come on.
I'm just talking about what the state requires. The state doesn't approve master plans. They're different requirements.
No, but what I'm saying is
Yeah.
the process that was gone through produced, as it always does, because of how it's done, a miserable response. I went to 2 or 3 of those meetings. They were what?
It's,
Honest efforts.
it's all us.
It's
Like,
all play
all
acting.
us. Wow.
It is.
Well, regardless, it's a process that the state requires specifically for this plan. So,
Yeah, so what? You can do it. There's no big problem.
Well,
It's who,
that's what we're talking about, is who's doing it, and when are we doing it, and how are we doing it.
take the old one, the old set of questionnaires, okay, and just update them. What's,
I feel like you don't, I'm a little lost, like, I mean, you don't think attitudes have changed in
yes,
almost 20 years? It's like,
yeah, but that you don't need to ask radically more intelligent, weird questions.
I think he's saying take the same questions and then send that out to the town to let them answer.
right,
If
We
not
don't have to like come up
exactly
with
the
a whole
same,
new survey, we just use the last
you
year's
know?
survey, or last summer's
Well,
survey.
I haven't
Here,
seen the
here.
survey, is it in, I
think-
think I
yeah,
can
it's
find
in
I
it.
there.
think it is in
My
here.
page numbers are different than yours.
Yeah,
And there's a whole, a
Well,
whole
let's look
series
at
of
that.
questions regarding resiliency and stuff. Nobody was thinking about
Yeah,
that
there's-
when
I
this
mean,
plan was
right.
done.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Nobody cared about affordable housing back then like they do today in relation to open space. You know, nobody was talking about climate change, any of that. That's all drastically different, pushing 20 years, 15 years,
Right.
14 years.
Right. There's new issues.
Even farming, the difference in the attitudes towards ag in the last 14 years have come a long way.
right, well, I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're the same.
No, but I mean, it might be a higher priority, it might be a greater focus, like one of those areas might be the greatest focus. Might not be, we did Mentor Field, I'm not saying that that serves every purpose, but that, the rec part might not be as big of a focus today as it was, in 2009 when we were still landing airplanes on Mentor Field. I'm just, I don't know,
But
I mean, I just,
is that rocket science to find out? That we have to hire somebody to tell us how to do that?
Well, none
I
of it's-
can't believe that.
None of it's rocket science, but it's a matter of figuring out the most efficient way and the best way to do that. And I will say from our experience with the master plan, we went into it thinking that we were perfectly capable of doing certain sections, and we probably were, but the time involved, it grew exponentially, which is why it took 10 years to get the plan, not 10 years, but quite a long time, 7 years to get the plan done.
yeah,
So, we
time and efficiency.
right, we want to get this done. We don't want to get bogged down. It would come back on the capacity of, staff who can help and the committee members. So,
Yeah, but I don't think there's any parallel between the master plan and this kind of thing. Really.
even the last time we did it, again, because it was all volunteers at that point, and then partly me after I started working here, it took longer than it would have if we had had, some consultant help working on it, so.
Consultants, this is what they do for a living, they're professionals and they're really good at it, we're volunteers, and although we can definitely, crank something out, I think to have like a document that's extremely meaningful, and that, I think that having that input from the outside would be beneficial, if we can find a way to make it work.
So to my mind, it sort of, goes back to looking at the workbook, looking at our plan, seeing what, what's current, what needs to be updated, and then what kind of resources we need to get the work done.
So maybe for, homework, we could divvy up the sections to just kind of do what's like a slightly deeper dive. I know all of you have read it and you're very familiar with it. We all have a pretty good level of familiarity, but really looking at it, looking at the survey, I don't know, does that make sense? There's 7.
We
well,
could, and then
6
which
sections.
parts do you think that we could tackle ourselves and which parts do we need help on,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? and then we can make like a list of tasks for Merrimack Valley that we think, like, who could do it? Could it be Merrimack Valley in those, you know, allotment of hours? Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I mean, I could get my hands on the survey that some other towns have done, that would be kind of interesting to see the public,
Well, isn't
how
that, you know,
similar
I
it
mean,
is to ours.
isn't that the logical way to do this, is what you look for is towns that are reasonably similar, I mean, I can do this for God's sake, to Newbury, that have done an open space plan which is publicly available, because they have to be by state law. I mean, isn't that the obvious place?
Yeah,
The kind
yeah,
of
would you
stuff.
like to take that survey task on, like getting copies of other towns' survey questions?
Not getting copies, you know, I mean, just
Well,
to.
what the survey questions were, like what their survey was that
Yeah.
they sent out. That would be super interesting, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll do that, yeah,
That's one of the
Right,
primary
yep.
ones to understand, because that's part of the early
Yep.
process. The mapping,
We like to joke, it's funny, the mapping, you know, like, we like to joke at work, because everybody's like, oh, you can just make this map, right? You know, and it's like, everybody thinks a map takes 30 minutes to make
yeah,
and whatnot. But minus the consistency of different entities doing different maps and their appearance.
yeah,
You know, I had spoken to you and Martha about Abby's work on land prioritization that she's done for towns through Greenbelt, you know, where she's, you know, looked at everything 5 acres or greater, you know, and developed maps for that, that we can have absolute access to for the report.
Do you have any idea how that work she's done aligns with the maps, the open space, like the state requires? Like different data layers that she's used?
I don't know all the data layers
Yeah.
that she's put in there, but I can find that out because she's actively doing a lot of it right now.
Yeah, I know mapping it, like you're saying, is a thing
Yeah.
that can like seem simple and then it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I'm looking at the list of maps from last time, and some of these will not have changed, like the
Right.
surficial geology and things like that, but I could see the maps that Abby has done as feeding directly into the action plan, because looking at those priorities
Yeah.
for, you know, due to flooding, for agricultural purposes.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the others were, but they were fabulous.
I know she was using everything 5 acres or more, everything ag. You know, 61 data was 2021 from the assessors at that point in time. You know, so
Yeah.
we'd have to get the updated 61
And we're
Data.
trying to do that with
Where
our
are you?
assessors maps,
Yeah.
the new My Map.
to bring that in as well.
Yeah.
But I can find out what else she has in there.
Well, I'll send around the link to the workbook that we've talked about, which again is, I don't think the state has updated that recently, but it's worth just kind of looking through, like how they describe the process that they want you to be doing.
It looks like this has not been, the one that I just found online is revised the last in March of 2008.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's another one that I didn't pick up, but if you look at the table of contents, it, you know, it aligns exactly with our table of contents in terms of the major sections and stuff.
Yeah,
With the workbook,
Yeah,
the most recent version have things around resiliency in some of the newer area,
I
focus
think
areas.
that's the most recent version.
Yeah, that is the most recent.
2008, yeah. I don't know where they, I was curious about the map that's called special features. Like, is that where they, like, where would they
Right.
have the flexibility to bring in some of the
Yeah.
newer data that exists? You know, all the projection data around climate, as, you know, the state has done so much with their mapping resources, so, anyway. I think it's the same person at the state who's been
I think
doing
so,
this
too.
for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
Like we didn't even, I read through the whole, inventory, I read through the whole thing, but the
Yeah.
inventory of lands and stuff, I'm like, conservation restrictions, agricultural preservation restrictions, I think has one sentence in the whole plan. Just as far as, again, like the shifts in time,
Yeah,
so,
that's interesting, yeah.
So we're gonna divvy it
Yeah.
up? There's another meeting coming in, right, at 7?
Yes, we
Yeah.
have FinCom's coming in at 7, so we need
Yeah.
to wrap up.
I'm happy to take on section 5, it's kind of in my wheelhouse.
Which one do you want?
And like, all of it needs to be updated in that section, just because so much has happened in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Yeah,
Over time. I mean, I think, I kind of chuckled, I think the only greenbelt thing was like, our big chunk of salt marsh off of Plum Island Turnpike was the graph reservation there. It was like the one that was like mentioned for greenbelt in town.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I was
It's
like,
changed a
oh,
lot.
it's changed, like, I don't think Wet Meadows was in here, Morris, any of that stuff, so I mean, there's like, oh,
yeah.
yeah, it's out of date.
Some good things to
Yeah.
get in there. I'm looking, there's a section, environmental challenges, that's actually probably the one that, the location for you to think about climate.
Right.
Where's that one? Where's environmental challenge?
Under,
Section?
4G.
under section 4,
Section-
inventory
section
and
four.
Oh,
analysis.
section 4.
Right.
Oh, yeah. We were thinking that we could take section 4. That's sort of in our wheelhouse.
You wanna look
With
at
the
that one?
fishery stuff and all that
Yeah.
Water
wildlife stuff.
resources, wildlife, yeah,
It's kinda us.
right up our alley.
Yeah.
Great.
I feel like I'm still learning a lot here.
I
Which is
know.
okay too.
So are we.
Which is okay too.
I don't know if,
Yeah,
like, 3 is static pretty much from, or is there? I just see, that doesn't
I mean,
need
it'd be
much,
worth
right?
Yeah,
reading,
it's
you
worth
wanna
reading.
do that one?
Well, is it gonna
Community
change
setting?
much?
I don't know, I
Actually,
mean,
But we need to know the answer, so if
Yeah.
you review it.
Okay, I could
Right.
get, I mean, if that's a safe one to take on at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think in section 3, the population characteristics and growth and development
Changing.
patterns, those have both changed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Active recreation
And
actually
active,
has as well.
yeah.
yeah, okay.
Community vision, it would be interesting to read that, but that will really come out of the process that we go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I guess that's where the survey is, in
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
process, the
Yeah.
description of process,
Right.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, we're wrapping up.
All right, I guess Martha and I will do the rest. I mean, I think the thing, I do think we need to do that exercise of going through and seeing what's been accomplished.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe Martha and I can start doing that, and maybe that's something we can do at the next meeting, like literally, just like.
I was going through this, I was looking at some of these tables and they were saying like, they were saying like, they're giving stats. I was like, well, how's that compared to now? Like, how much has this changed? I was looking like the population, like, they're like, by 2020, it's gonna be 8,000 people. I was like, well, we fell short of that. I guess that's a whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was interesting.
Yeah,
And a lot of this information
Yeah.
we're getting now with our housing production plan update and stuff like that, so.
Mm. Yeah, It
Yeah.
seems like there's probably more sources of data to do all the updates than there were, when this was originally written.
yeah.
Yeah, or easier access to that data.
Easier access to it,
Yeah.
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 And I do think there's probably a lot in here that can be pulled in.
Yeah.
Like all the population growth stuff has just been done, and we're still updating.
Well, they're supposed to actually, I mean, they're actually, that is one of the things that the state looks at, is there any congruence between
The-
areas in the master plan and the open space plan?
Right,
And if there isn't, that's when you get a call from the state
yeah,
to say, guys,
yeah, yeah.
Do you have a Word document of this? Just out of curiosity?
I think we do.
So if we wanna, when we get to that point though, it's just easy to edit and update instead of reinventing formatting or merging formatting or whatever, like, can all work, I know, right?
Start breaking into a
Hives a
sweat.
little bit there, you know, just wanted to check, make sure that there was a Word document somewhere.
Right.
Still,
We're not
for
starting
somebody
with
that's
like
a
a
very
PDF that we're
fast
converting.
typer, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I'm gonna get kicked out.
Hopefully adjourn.
Do you, would it be better to meet at 7? That'd be lovely. That'd be better. Do you guys want that?
If I was a little early, but I mean, I'm a little more flexible.
Yeah,
Tuesdays
I
are-
don't know, what is, I
As long as
already
it's
pushed it to
Tuesdays, I
5:30, so
yeah, 5:30,
I'm
yeah.
like open to, I don't need to be
Yeah, I mean, either works for me.
in charge.
Eat first and then
Right, let's say that's the
have
difference,
some
right?
energy rather than saying, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
we could do that.
Give it a shot.
I'm open to it.
all right.
Does that push it out of Tuesdays? Is there other meetings or anything, or?
I think it just depends what Tuesday
Okay.
Depends on which
right?
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, but we can probably find a Tuesday that,
Okay.
is Tuesday still good?
Tuesdays is probably the best day of the week for me.
In
Yeah,
March.
and we are gonna be on vacation in March a little bit, so if we need to send, we might have to send our review of section 4 in advance, or
Okay,
Depends when it falls.
depends when it falls.
yeah,
We're gonna be gone for two Tuesdays.
okay,
That might be in the same boat.
yeah, yeah.
I might miss one Tuesday in March.
Let's pick the one that we're all not here. You know, yeah, okay, we'll look at it. I mean, we have a lot of other meetings, planning meetings and public hearings and stuff up till town meeting, so we'll just take a look at March and see. Find some times.
Okay.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
The minutes look good. Do we approve the minutes?
I read them, I approve of them.
Yeah.
I know I'm not officially
Yes.
on the committee, but I
Seconded.
approve it.
Yes. Okay, can't wait to have more official committee members. Yes. All right,
Okay, so who are we getting out of here for, do we know?
We should adjourn first.
All right.
I make a motion to adjourn,
So moved. That works.
or second.
Seconded, sorry.
yeah.
All in favor?
Alright.
We can't vote yet,
It's
but
always,
yes.
I was always on the other side of the table, I was never on this side of the table, so.